The galaxy had always whispered about humans, but on this day, whispers turned into screams. For centuries, humans were known as explorers, traders, and survivors. They lived on a world others called a death world, a planet full of storms, volcanoes, predators, and endless dangers. Most species who studied Earth agreed that no life should have survived there. But humans did, and that was already strange enough. Still, most aliens thought of humans as curious and reckless, but not truly dangerous. They were a young species in galactic terms, barely walking among the stars for a few centuries. They had made allies, signed treaties, and followed the laws of the Galactic Council. They smiled, they shook hands, they played by the rules. But deep down, some suspected that this was only a mask. Some feared that humans were not showing their true nature. They wondered, what would happen if the Deathworlders ever stopped pretending? And then, the signals came. It started with a faint transmission on the edges of the Orion Arm. A fleet of alien scouts picked it up first. Static, broken words, and a scream that echoed across subspace. The scouts tried to decrypt the message, but before they could, their ships vanished. No wreckage, no distress beacons, nothing. Just silence. Within hours, more signals appeared. Strange codes carried across communication lines, spreading faster than anyone could track. Some ships reported hearing human voices in their systems, even when no humans were present. Others saw human symbols flash across their screens, red warnings, countdowns, threats. Worlds panicked. The name of Earth spread like fire. The whispers returned, but now they carried fear. The humans are moving, some said. They are done playing fair, others whispered. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the leaders of hundreds of species gathered. Their voices clashed, rising in anger and worry. Some demanded that Earth be sanctioned, cut off, and destroyed before it was too late. Others argued that humans could not possibly hold such power. The truth was simple, no one knew what the humans were hiding. On the third day, a ship of the Valari Empire, known for its massive fleets, tried to confront a small human vessel near the rim. The Valari captain laughed at the size of the human ship. It was smaller, weaker, and carried fewer weapons. Confident, the Valari opened fire. And then, the galaxy saw something it had never seen before. The human ship moved. Not like any ship should move. It bent physics, twisting through space as if gravity itself obeyed its will. Weapons fired, but they missed, sliding off into empty darkness. And then the human vessel fired only once. The Valari ship did not explode. It simply vanished. No fire, no wreckage, no survivors. As if reality itself had been cut away. That day, the rumor became a scream. Humans had revealed a weapon no one understood. Some said it was forbidden technology. Others whispered about time manipulation, or control over dimensions. But no matter the explanation, the fear was the same. Time manipulation, or control over dimensions. But no matter the explanation, the fear was the same. Every world began asking the same question. If this was only the beginning, then what else were the Deathworlders hiding? In the council chamber, silence fell for the first time in centuries. Every leader, every ambassador, every soldier in that room felt the same cold realization. Humanity was no longer the curious newcomer. They were something else. Something dangerous. And the worst part was this: humans had not made a declaration, had not explained their actions, had not even spoken a single word. They simply acted. The silence was louder than any threat. In the outer colonies, alien civilians began to flee from human-controlled space. Merchants refused to trade with Earth ships. Borders closed. But the humans did not chase them, did not demand answers. They continued moving forward, silent, calm, unstoppable. The more the galaxy watched, the more the fear grew. The humans had lived on a death world. They had learned from storms, earthquakes, predators, and poison. To them, survival was natural. To them, fear was normal. And now, that nature was no longer hidden. Legends began forming overnight. Old records were pulled from archives, dusty warnings written by explorers who had first encountered Earth. One record told of a scout ship that landed on the human homeworld centuries ago. Only one crew member survived, and his last words were burned into history: "If they ever leave their world, none of us will be safe." And now, that prophecy felt real. The Council tried to control the panic. They sent envoys to Earth, demanding answers. But the humans never replied. They listened, they watched, but they gave no response. It was as if they no longer cared to explain themselves. This silence drove the galaxy into madness. Without words, every mind imagined the worst. Some believed humans had built hidden fleets stronger than any empire. Others thought they had discovered powers from beyond the stars. And some, in their darkest fears, whispered that humans had allied with something even older and darker than the galaxy itself. On the frontier worlds, soldiers refused to face humans. Captains begged their governments to avoid conflict. Even the most warlike species, who once mocked Earth as fragile, now looked over their shoulders in fear. But among the humans, there was no panic, no chaos. Their people lived their lives, their fleets moved with purpose, and their leaders remained silent. They had stopped pretending, and the galaxy had no idea how to face them. It was said later that in those first days, when whispers turned to screams, a message spread across alien worlds. A single phrase, carried from one survivor to another. The humans are awake now. And from that moment, the galaxy understood. The Deathworlders were no longer just a rumor, no longer a curiosity. They were a storm, and no one knew where it would strike next. The warnings had always been there, hidden in old records, buried in forgotten archives, and spoken by voices that no one wanted to believe. Long before the first human ship left the cradle of Earth, a handful of explorers had touched the edges of their system and returned with strange reports. Their words were mocked at the time. Humans are dangerous, they had written. They are predators among the stars. But the Council had dismissed it, saying no new species could rise from such a violent world and survive among the stars. It was easier to laugh than to fear. Yet now, as the signals spread and the first fleets vanished, those old warnings were remembered. Librarians, historians, and archivists were dragged into council chambers. Old data crystals were reopened, faded transmissions restored. The same chilling pattern repeated itself. Every early encounter with humans ended in shock, confusion, and death. Even when humans did not mean harm, their very presence brought chaos. Their diseases adapted too fast. Their machines worked in places no one else dared to go. Their minds seemed wired to see opportunity where others saw death. The council gathered again, but this time the voices were quieter. Fear spread like a cold wind through the chamber. Every species that had once called themselves wise now looked uncertain. The elders of the Krell demanded immediate war against humanity. They shouted that humans must be destroyed before their true power spread further. The Lorian ambassadors disagreed. They said war would only feed the fire, and that perhaps humans could still be reasoned with. But no one truly believed that anymore. Reports arrived from across the rim. Fleets were refusing orders. Colonies were cutting communication. Merchants were abandoning trade routes near human space. Even the mighty empires, who had boasted of fleets larger than Earth's population, now found themselves hesitating. What good were numbers, if a single human ship could erase them with one strike? On the barren moon of Ithek, a group of miners swore they saw a shadow move across the sky. When they looked up, there was nothing but empty stars. Hours later, their entire mining rig vanished, leaving only scorched stone. Survivors whispered that a human weapon had done it, though no one ever saw a ship. The story spread faster than the truth ever could. Across the galaxy, fear no longer needed evidence. For the first time in centuries, the council leaders argued in whispers, not in shouts. They remembered the archives too well now. 1,000 years ago, a philosopher had written of Earth, though he had never set foot there. He had studied their nature from a distance. His words echoed now, repeated in every hall: humans are the storm. You cannot reason with the storm. You can only survive it. On Earth, the humans said nothing. No reply to the Council's demands. No messages to reassure their allies. Not even a denial of the rumors. They moved quietly, as if their silence was more powerful than any weapon. Some alien leaders called this arrogance. Others called it confidence. But for most, it was terror. Because silence left room for imagination, and imagination was cruel. Every species saw their darkest fear reflected in humanity's silence. The warlike races imagined weapons beyond comprehension. The cautious ones imagined humans playing a game of patience, waiting until every empire collapsed on its own. And the proudest rulers imagined themselves already defeated, long before the first battle. One night, in the deep void of unclaimed space, a freighter stumbled across a drifting escape pod. Inside was a lone survivor from the Valari fleet that had been erased. His skin was burned, his eyes wide with madness, but he spoke before he died. His words were broadcast across 10 systems before the council locked them down. "They don't fight like us," he whispered. "They don't think like us. They don't care about rules. They decide, and then the universe obeys." That single line spread through the stars, copied and repeated until no one could stop it. Children whispered it to each other in fear. Soldiers repeated it in their barracks. Even rulers in their palaces heard it echoing in their thoughts. The old warnings were no longer dismissed. They were prophecy. And still, Earth remained quiet. Every fleet moved closer to their borders, every spy sent to watch their movements. But what they found was not war preparations, not armies gathering, not speeches of conquest. Instead, they found humans living as if nothing had changed. Cities lit up in the night. Ships carried goods from one world to another. Families walked under the glow of their suns. That was perhaps the most terrifying part of all. The humans were not acting like conquerors. They were not shouting their intentions. They were simply being themselves. And if this was what they were without trying, then what would they become when they finally decided to try? The galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. The Deathworlders had always been dangerous, but they had also always been patient. The Council's laws, the treaties, the agreements, they had only been masks. Masks that were now slipping away. The forgotten warnings had returned, louder than ever. And as the whispers grew, every species felt the same dreadful thought. The humans had not yet begun. The galaxy expected humans to defend, to wait until they were attacked, to follow the ancient rules of war that every civilized species had agreed upon. But the humans did not wait. They moved first. The first strike was small, almost unnoticeable in the chaos of frightened reports. A patrol fleet from the Torvain Empire vanished near the border of human space. At first, the Torvain believed it was a technical failure. Their ships were powerful, their technology advanced, and they had faced no equal for centuries. They sent another fleet, larger this time, to investigate. That fleet never returned. The Torvain Emperor demanded answers from the Council. He accused the humans of cowardly ambushes, of breaking every law that bound the galaxy together. But the Council had no answers to give. There were no recordings, no transmissions, no wreckage. Just silence, the kind of silence that carried more weight than a declaration of war. On the frontier, alien captains began to whisper among themselves. They spoke of human ships appearing from nowhere, firing only once, and then disappearing before alarms could even sound. Some swore the humans could vanish into folds of space that no other species understood. Others claimed the humans had created weapons that bent time itself. No one knew the truth. That was what made it worse. The galaxy was built on rules. Every empire, every species, every war, they all played by them. Wars were fought with honor, or at least with order. Fleets met fleets. Battles had beginnings and ends. Even when blood was spilled, there were lines that no one crossed. But now, the Deathworlders had crossed them all. Stories spread of human strikes that made no sense. A Torvain supply depot exploded from within, even though no ship was seen near it. A Council intelligence base went dark, and when scouts arrived, they found every system corrupted with human code. Entire fleets sent against Earth returned with empty cargo holds, their weapons missing, their engines cut out piece by piece, as if stolen while the ships were still alive. It was not war. It was something worse. It was a hunt. And humanity hunted well. In the council chamber, fear turned into anger. Some demanded retaliation. The Krell declared that a grand alliance should be formed, that every empire should pour its fleets together and strike Earth before it was too late. But even as they shouted, every leader knew the truth. Alliances required trust, and trust was already gone. No species wanted to put their fleet in front of humans. No ruler wanted their name written in history as the one who faced the Deathworlders first. The humans had not spoken a single threat. They had not declared war. But their silence was louder than war drums. Their actions said enough. On distant colonies, soldiers began to desert. Some said openly they would not fight humans. Others fled quietly into space, preferring exile to battle. Civilians whispered in the streets, asking how long it would be before human fleets appeared above their skies. Among humans, though, there was no fear. Their fleets moved with calm precision. Their leaders gave no speeches, no public orders. They acted like a predator that no longer needed to prove its strength. The galaxy had expected humans to defend, but humans had chosen to strike first. And that simple choice changed everything. In the far reaches, a lone freighter claimed to have witnessed the destruction of a Torvain warship. The crew swore that the human ship did not fire lasers, missiles, or plasma. Instead, they saw the warship fold in on itself, like a shadow collapsing into nothing. One crew member described it in a broken voice. It was like they told reality to forget the ship, and it obeyed. Whether true or not, the story spread like a plague. Every retelling added more terror, more mystery. By the time it reached the core worlds, the tale had become a nightmare legend. The galaxy had been wrong to think humans would wait. Wrong to think they would fight by the same rules. Wrong to think they were predictable. The humans were not fighting for borders, or for honor, or even for conquest. They were fighting as if the galaxy had already wronged them. They were fighting like survivors of a world that had tried to kill them every day, and now they were showing the stars what that meant. The first strike had been small. But it was only the beginning. And the galaxy understood, with a fear that spread through every empire, that there would be no end to it. The most dangerous weapon is not the one you see, but the one you never notice until it is too late. That was what the galaxy was beginning to learn about humans. For centuries, every empire had believed they knew the limits of technology. Fleets grew larger, shields grew stronger, weapons fired faster, but in the end, everyone played with the same pieces. Every empire could measure the other. Every commander could predict what an enemy might do. But then came the humans, and the silent weapon they revealed. It began with whispers of ships moving where no ships should be. Alien fleets patrolled their borders, scanning for intruders, but again and again, humans appeared inside secure zones. No alarms had sounded, no gates had opened, no signatures had been detected. They were simply there. Entire human squadrons appeared in the heart of enemy territory, struck once, and then were gone before a response could even be formed. The Council demanded answers from its scientists. Was it cloaking? Was it wormhole travel? Was it something stolen from forgotten ruins? But no one could explain it. Sensors designed over thousands of years could not see the humans until it was already too late. To the galaxy, it was as if humanity had learned how to hide in the folds of reality itself. And then, worse news arrived. Human fleets were not the only ones vanishing and reappearing. Supplies began to disappear too. Fuel depots went empty overnight. Weapons stockpiles crumbled to dust. At first, alien leaders thought it was sabotage, betrayal from within their own empires. But captured fragments of data told a different story. Human code had infected their systems, slipping past defenses without even being detected. It was invisible, perfect, like a ghost whispering through circuits. The galaxy began to realize the truth. Humanity's silent weapon was not only in their ships. It was in their minds. On the death world called Earth, survival was not about brute strength alone. It was about cleverness. It was about finding ways to win against storms, predators, and hunger, all stronger than they were. Where other species relied on strength or tradition, humans had relied on imagination. That imagination had now become a weapon sharper than any blade. A fleet of the Krell Dominion tried to test this theory. They gathered 50 warships, proud and confident, and marched toward a human colony. The Council monitored the battle, hoping to see proof that humans could be stopped. But when the Krell arrived, there was no colony. Only empty ground where a city should have been, as if it had never existed. Moments later, the Krell fleet collapsed into confusion. Their weapons shut down, their engines died, their communications screamed with human voices repeating a single phrase, "You are not ready." By the time backup fleets arrived, the Krell were gone. Not destroyed, gone. Their ships missing, their crews untraceable. The galaxy froze in fear. For the first time, empires that had never bent to anyone began to tremble. What good were fleets, when humans could erase them without firing a single visible shot? What good were weapons, when they could be turned against their owners? What good was courage, when fear had already eaten the will to fight? But the most terrifying part was not what humans did. It was what they did not do. They did not claim territory. They did not conquer worlds. They did not send demands. They only moved silently, striking when they chose, and then vanishing again. Like shadows, they seemed everywhere and nowhere at once. Whispers spread in taverns, in barracks, in marketplaces. Maybe humans can't be fought. Maybe they're not even using ships. Maybe they've learned to become part of space itself. The stories grew darker with each telling. No proof, but plenty of fear. The council argued day and night. Some believed humans had unlocked ancient secrets, something left behind by civilizations older than the stars. Others believed humans had simply pushed their Deathworld minds too far, creating weapons no sane species would ever attempt. Whatever the truth, one fact was certain: the humans no longer played the game the galaxy understood. And that changed everything. The silent weapon was not just technology. It was the unknown. Every species, every soldier, every leader now carried the same thought: what else are they hiding? It was a question that made even the bravest warriors lose sleep. Because the galaxy had only seen a glimpse. And if this was only the beginning, then the true storm of the Deathworlders was still waiting. Empires that had stood for thousands of years now found themselves trembling at the thought of humanity. For as long as history was recorded, the great powers of the galaxy had believed they were eternal. Their fleets were endless, their borders stretched across hundreds of systems, their rulers spoke as if their words were law written into the stars. They had survived wars, rebellions, and disasters. They believed nothing could shake them. But then the humans moved, and everything they thought permanent began to break. The first cracks appeared in the Valari Empire. Their people had been proud for generations, warriors bred in the tradition of conquest. They had mocked humanity when the first whispers of danger spread. The Deathworlders are reckless animals, one admiral declared. They cannot threaten an empire that has ruled since before their species learned to write. The admiral's fleet vanished 3 days later. No signal, no wreckage, no explanation. The Valari called it an accident, a tragedy, but fear had already spread among their people. Whispers of human shadows filled their markets and streets. Some colonies even refused to pay their taxes, demanding protection against humanity before they would send resources back to the throne. The Krell Dominion was no better. Their rulers, cruel and merciless, commanded with an iron hand. They believed fear was their greatest weapon. But when humans came, it was the Krell who learned what true fear was. Reports arrived of outposts silenced without a single shot. Garrisons woke to find their weapons melted into useless scraps of metal, their communication lines filled with human voices repeating words they did not understand. Krell soldiers, who once prided themselves on discipline, abandoned their posts in the dark of night. For the first time in their history, their empire faced not rebellion, but collapse from within. The council chambers filled with desperate voices. The smaller nations cried for protection, demanding the great empires act. The great empires shouted louder, trying to convince themselves they were still in control. But deep down, every ruler, every ambassador, every soldier felt the same hollow truth: humans had broken the balance. Wars were supposed to have winners and losers. But this was no war. This was a lesson, and humanity was the teacher. On the world of Drayles Prime, a merchant ship limped back into port after encountering a human vessel. The merchant swore his ship had been spared deliberately. He told the story to anyone who would listen. He said the human captain had opened a channel, stared directly into his eyes, and said only one sentence before letting him go: "Tell them we are done pretending." Those words spread faster than any fleet could travel. Across the galaxy, the phrase became legend. Done pretending. Every empire repeated it in fear, wondering what else humans had hidden all this time. Civilizations that had once been arrogant now found themselves choking on doubt. The proud Laurian dynasties, who had ruled with elegance and cunning, began to quietly move their families away from the frontier, retreating deeper into their core worlds. The powerful Torvain, whose fleets had stretched like iron chains across the stars, recalled their ships to protect their throne world. Even the mysterious Sithari, who had always remained neutral, sent secret messages to Earth, begging for terms, offering resources and alliances just to be left alone. The empires were not just trembling, they were breaking. Yet through it all, humanity never gave speeches. They never demanded surrender. They never raised flags above conquered worlds. They simply acted, and the galaxy responded with panic. Every empire began preparing for the storm they could not predict. And in doing so, they weakened themselves. Alliances collapsed under suspicion. Treaties burned in silence. Resources were hoarded, fleets pulled back, borders closed. The galaxy was no longer united under the Council. It was a maze of frightened rulers waiting for the next human strike. But the humans did not strike everywhere. They chose carefully. They moved in ways no one could understand, attacking one empire here, vanishing there, letting others watch in silence. Each move made the survivors more afraid. Each disappearance left the galaxy wondering, why them? Why not us? Are we next? The great powers who once ruled with certainty now lived in dread. For the first time, their people looked to the sky and prayed not for victory, but for mercy. And still, the humans gave none. They simply moved forward, calm and patient, like predators who already knew the outcome. The empires that had once called themselves eternal now realized a bitter truth: eternity was only a dream. And the day the Deathworlders stopped playing fair, that dream began to die. No warships, no armies, yet whole worlds vanished overnight. That was how the galaxy described it later, but for those who lived through it, there were no words strong enough. Humanity had moved beyond the predictable rhythms of battle. They no longer sent fleets to meet fleets. They no longer fought wars that others could measure or record. They struck like shadows, leaving behind only silence and fear. It began on the frontier world of Haska, a mining colony under the control of the Krell Dominion. One night, the stars above the colony shimmered strangely, as if the sky itself had cracked. No alarms sounded, no ships appeared, but by morning the colony was gone. Every mine, every machine, every building, vanished. Only empty ground remained, smooth and untouched, as though no one had ever lived there. The neighboring world sent scouts, but they found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, not even a trace of energy to study. Haska had simply been erased. Days later, it happened again, this time on a Torvain stronghold. A fortress world with weapons that could burn entire fleets to ash disappeared into silence. The Torvain swore they had the best defenses in the galaxy, shields that could hold against any siege. But those defenses never activated. The human strike was so quiet that even the planet's moons continued to orbit empty space where their world used to be. The galaxy struggled to understand. The Council demanded proof, demanded answers, but none came. Scientists tried to explain it, inventing theories about spatial collapse, gravitational folds, or forbidden weapons that unmade matter itself. Priests claimed it was divine punishment, that humanity had been chosen by some higher force. Ordinary people whispered something simpler: humans had learned how to make entire worlds disappear, and no one could stop them. Soldiers, who once stood tall in their armor, now looked at the sky with unease. They had trained their whole lives to fight fleets, to march against armies. How could they fight an enemy that did not even need to be seen to win? Commanders who had built their careers on strategy sat in silence, knowing their plans meant nothing against shadows. Even spies, who had infiltrated human space, returned empty-handed. They spoke of cities that looked normal, of people who lived their lives without fear, of leaders who gave no signs of building weapons. It was as if humanity kept its secrets hidden not in machines, but in the minds of its people. The galaxy realized that the humans were not using strength to win. They were using patience. They struck without warning, but never everywhere. One empire would lose a world, another would lose a fleet, and the rest would watch in horror, waiting for their turn. The uncertainty was the weapon. No one knew who would be next. No one knew when. The fear spread faster than any army ever could. The smaller nations begged the great empires for protection, but the great empires trembled too. They had built their strength on order, on rules of war, on the idea that numbers meant safety. But numbers could not protect them now. Every fleet pulled back to guard homeworlds. Every empire hoarded resources, preparing for a siege that never came. The galaxy stopped moving forward. Trade collapsed, exploration halted, and diplomacy fell apart. Humanity had not conquered a single planet, yet they had brought the stars to their knees. In taverns and marketplaces, new legends were whispered. They spoke of human ships that could pass through walls of reality, of weapons that could silence suns, of armies that were never seen because they walked in dimensions unknown. Some of the stories were lies, others exaggerations, but all of them carried fear. And fear did more damage than any weapon. Still, the humans gave no speeches, no warnings, no reasons. They remained silent, their faces calm, their fleets hidden. They struck only when they chose, and every strike deepened the mystery. Some believed humanity had no plan at all, that they were acting on instinct alone, like predators playing with their prey. Others believed this was the beginning of something much larger, that the erased colonies and vanished fleets were only a test. The truth was never clear, and that was what terrified the galaxy most. On a lonely world at the edge of council space, an old scholar wrote a line that spread as quickly as the rumors: the Deathworlders fight like shadows because they were born in shadow. Their silence is not weakness, it is hunger. That line was carried across comms, quoted in speeches, repeated in whispers. It became another piece of the growing legend. The Day of Shadows, they began to call it. The time when humanity stopped being seen as just another species and became something else, something unknown. Worlds trembled, fleets hid, and the galaxy realized that shadows, once unleashed, could not be contained. And the worst part was this: every alien leader knew the shadows were only getting started. Every survivor told the same story: the day the Deathworlders stopped playing fair. It did not matter if they were soldiers, merchants, or simple civilians. Their words were always filled with the same terror, the same awe. Humanity had become a legend in their own lifetime, a force that spread across the stars not through speeches or banners, but through silence and fear. The survivors of the Valari fleets described it first. Those who had escaped swore that the humans did not fight like warriors, but like hunters. They remembered ships that seemed to vanish into nothing, weapons that cut through shields without resistance, and tactics that ignored every rule of war. Some spoke of human faces appearing on their comms before the end, calm, cold, almost pitying. Others remembered no faces at all, only voices saying a single phrase: "This is what you feared. This is what we are." Soon, the survivors of the Krell told their stories too. They spoke of weapons that did not burn or blast, but silenced. Ships powered down in mid-battle, soldiers found their weapons useless, entire bases lost communication before vanishing into quiet. They said fighting humans was like drowning in darkness: you struggled, you screamed, and then everything ended. The more these stories spread, the larger they grew. Some claimed humans could walk unseen through ships, touching controls without being noticed. Others swore humanity had no need for weapons at all, that their minds alone bent machines and shattered defenses. No proof existed, but it did not matter. Legends did not need proof. They needed fear, and humanity had already given the galaxy more fear than it could hold. On the world of Korith, a historian wrote, "The Deathworlders changed in a single day. Yesterday, they were newcomers. Today, they are a story every child will know." His words spread through schools, markets, and military barracks, until even those who had never seen a human believed in the legend. And what a legend it was! They called it many names. The Day of Silence. The Day of Shadows. The Day of the Unleashed. But no matter the name, the meaning was the same: the day humanity revealed that they had never been weak, only patient. That they had followed the rules only to learn them, only to understand the game, and once they did, they tore the rules apart. Even the mighty council could not stop the legend. They tried to suppress the stories, banning the recordings, silencing the broadcasts. But every time they tried, the fear only grew. Soldiers repeated the tales to each other when they thought no one was listening. Merchants carried the whispers from system to system, weaving them into their trades. Refugees told them in hushed voices around fires on forgotten worlds. The council's power had never felt so fragile. Their chambers, once filled with loud voices and endless debate, were now heavy with silence. No one wanted to be the first to say what everyone knew: humanity had changed the galaxy forever. But humanity did not declare victory. They did not claim empires. They did not march their fleets into capital worlds. They remained quiet, distant, their movements hidden. This silence only made the legend grow stronger. Because legends live best in the unknown, in the places where imagination is stronger than truth. Children of alien races began to play games where one pretended to be a Deathworlder, and the rest had to hide. Soldiers prayed before battles that no humans would appear. Politicians built entire campaigns on promises to protect their people from Earth, though none could explain how. And still, the humans waited. It was said by many that this was their greatest weapon of all, not the ships, not the technology, not even the strange powers that seemed to unmake fleets and worlds. No, their greatest weapon was time. They could wait as long as they wanted, because fear did the work for them. Empires crumbled under the weight of uncertainty. Colonies rebelled not because humans attacked them, but because they were afraid of being next. In one of the darkest whispers that traveled the stars, someone said, "Perhaps the humans don't need to fight anymore. Perhaps they already won the moment we began to fear them." And that was the legend every survivor carried. Not a battle, not a speech, not a single moment of conquest, but the change of the galaxy's heart. The Deathworlders were no longer a species. They were a story, a warning, a shadow that stretched across every world. The survivors always ended their tales the same way, with a silence that made listeners shiver. Because after everything, after all the fear and destruction, there was still one question that none of them could answer. If this was what happened when the Deathworlders merely stopped playing fair, then what would happen when they decided to show their full strength? The galaxy held its breath. The stories of erased worlds, vanished fleets, and silent strikes had spread everywhere, but still no one understood what humanity truly wanted. They did not claim territory, they did not demand tribute, and they did not speak to the council. They simply moved like shadows, leaving fear in their wake. And fear grew heavier with every passing day. Across the great empires, rulers gathered in secret. Some argued that humanity must be destroyed before it was too late. Others whispered that perhaps it was already too late. Fleets were recalled, armies fortified their strongholds, and spies were sent into human space. None of it brought answers. The humans did not act like conquerors. They acted like predators, watching and waiting, letting their prey weaken itself. The council, once proud and commanding, was drowning in silence. Every leader remembered the first signals, the day the whispers had turned into screams. They remembered how quickly control had slipped through their fingers. Now, their chambers felt more like a tomb than a hall of power. Fear sat heavier than law, heavier than reason. On distant worlds, ordinary people told stories around dim lights. They spoke of humans who could end suns with a thought, of fleets that traveled between shadows, of weapons that never needed to fire because their enemies surrendered before the battle began. Children grew up playing games where the Deathworlder always won, because there was no way to stop them. Legends became culture. Fear became memory. And still, the humans said nothing. The silence was unbearable. Empires fractured under it. The Krell Dominion, once the strongest, collapsed into civil war when its people demanded protection their leaders could not give. The Torvain, proud and ruthless, began retreating into their core worlds, abandoning colonies to fend for themselves. The council tried to hold order, but no one listened anymore. Everyone was too busy watching the sky, waiting for the shadows. In truth, humanity had not erased as many worlds as the galaxy believed. The number was small, chosen carefully. But it did not matter. The fear had done the rest. Every rumor grew larger, every silence turned into a story, every missing ship became proof of Deathworlder power. Humanity had learned something no empire ever had, that legends are stronger than weapons. And they wielded that legend with perfect patience. Among the scattered survivors, some spoke of a deeper plan. They said humans were not striking randomly. Every world they erased, every fleet they silenced, every leader they humbled, it was all part of a pattern. Like moves on a game board too vast for anyone else to see. The council dismissed this as fear-driven madness, but even they looked at their maps in secret, wondering if the survivors were right. The truth was never spoken aloud, but every leader felt it in their bones. The humans had not revealed their full strength yet. What the galaxy had seen, the erased colonies, the vanished fleets, was only the beginning. And then came the day that proved it. On the rim of council space, a fleet of 100 warships gathered, each from a different empire. It was the largest force ever assembled since the founding of the council. They swore to hunt the Deathworlders, to end the legend once and for all. Their banners waved, their weapons gleamed, and their leaders declared that courage would defeat fear. They entered the dark void near human space. They sent messages demanding parley, demanding surrender, demanding explanation. But there was no answer. Days passed. Silence. Weeks passed. Silence. And then, suddenly, the silence deepened. Ships began to vanish from the formation. No explosion, no battle, no alarms. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. Panic spread through the fleet as commanders shouted orders, but their voices were swallowed by static. Screens flickered, power died, and one by one, the mighty warships fell silent. No one escaped. The galaxy never learned what happened to that fleet. No wreckage was found, no survivors returned. It was as if they had been swallowed whole. But across the stars, everyone knew the truth. The humans had let the galaxy glimpse just a fraction more of their power. Not conquest, not negotiation, erasure. That day was remembered as the final silence. It broke the last resistance in the galaxy. No empire dared challenge the Deathworlders again. The council dissolved into scattered factions. Armies that had once ruled with iron discipline refused to march. Colonies surrendered before a single shot was fired, simply whispering, "Better to bow than to vanish." Yet humanity did not take their thrones. They did not raise their flags. They remained shadows, watching from the edges, letting the galaxy unravel under its own fear. This, perhaps, was their greatest victory, that they did not need to conquer. They had already won the moment fear took root. And so, the legend became eternal. Stories passed from world to world, from generation to generation. Children who had never seen a human still feared them. Entire cultures built prayers around avoiding their wrath. Scholars argued for centuries about what humanity truly was, monsters, gods, or something else entirely. No answer ever came. The humans gave no speeches, no warnings, no promises. They left only silence. And silence was enough. Because in that silence, every alien mind filled the void with its own terror. In that silence, every empire broke itself. In that silence, the Deathworlders became more than a species, they became a myth, a shadow stretching across eternity. And long after the council crumbled, long after empires fell to dust, one truth remained, carried in whispers from star to star. The day the Deathworlders stopped playing fair was the day the galaxy ended, and the legend of humanity began.